Live from our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is a Decision 2014 special program. Today, a debate with Democratic candidates for the 9th Hampden District House seat. And now, here's Rich Teddemer.
Good afternoon. 22 News is working for you this week as we let the candidates you'll see on the ballot next Tuesday debate the issues. Today it's the candidates running for the 9th Hampden District seat in the State House. From left to right, incumbent Representative Sean Curran is not seeking re-election. And now, from left to right, three Democrats running in the primary are Edward Collins Jr., Peter Murphy, and Jose Tosado. I will ask the candidates the questions. They have up to 1 minute to respond with an answer, and we'll go in rotating order. First, each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement. Peter Murphy, you get to go first.
Well, thank you very much, Rich, and thank you for hosting this debate, and thank you to Channel 22 for having us on. My name is Peter Murphy. I'm a candidate for the 9th Hampden District State Representative seat, and if I'm elected, I will fight tirelessly for Western Massachusetts. I'm currently on the Springfield School Committee. I've served as Vice Chair of the Springfield Public School Committee. I also have 3 children in the Springfield Public Schools, and they're doing wonderfully. We have some great things happening in the Springfield Public Schools, and I'm glad that I've been a part of it. I also have been an assistant district attorney. I worked for District Attorney William Bennett. I was a domestic violence prosecutor, a sexual assault prosecutor, and I've been a trial attorney for 20 years. I've tried a lot of big cases, a lot of civil cases, a lot of criminal cases, and I've had a lot of success. And I'd like to take that advocacy down to Boston. And if I'm lucky enough to be elected to the 9th Hampden District, I will go down to Boston and fight tirelessly for Western Massachusetts and use my skills as an advocate to bring back revenue to Western Massachusetts to make sure we get the resources we need to improve public education, to create jobs, and to make sure that our neighborhoods are safe.
Thank you, Peter. Jose Tosado, your opening statement, please.
First of all, good afternoon, and thank you to Channel 22 and Rich for hosting this debate. We in Western Mass are very well aware that we do not receive the resources that we need. Jobs, money, and opportunities get bottlenecked east of Worcester. That situation is likely to get worse with the loss of 3 experienced legislators from Western Massachusetts, both in the House and in the Senate. We can ill afford to not be able to send the best candidate, the most experienced candidate, to Beacon Hill to fight for Springfield, Chicopee, and the 9th Hampden District. With my experience as a military veteran, a former police commissioner, member of the school committee, the city council, 3 times having been elected president by my colleagues, as well as with over 25 years of management experience, makes me the most qualified person to go and hit the floor running on day 1 on Beacon Hill. If you agree with me, I would ask for your vote and for your support on September 9th. Thank you.
Edward Collins, your opening statement, please.
Thank you very much, Rich, and thank you to the viewers for watching this program and becoming informed about this important race. Also want to thank Channel 22 for hosting it, and for my 2 colleagues who are my opponents in this race for having run a very high road campaign. It's been a pleasure to campaign with them and against them. My name is Ed Collins. I'm a lifelong resident of Springfield, except for a few years serving in the United States Navy in the 1960s. Springfield has always been my home. Born and brought up in the Forest Park neighborhood on West Alvord Street, and I've been a homeowner and resident in 16 acres now since 1971. My grown son, Dan, attended Springfield Public Schools. I've done most of my working life representing working people as a representative of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, which has given me the opportunity to do a number of things, including a fair amount of legislative work, and it's prepared me, I think, to be your next state representative.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. All right, candidates, it's time for the questions. Each candidate will have exactly 60 seconds to answer the questions. I'll ask the questions, and then you have the 60 seconds to respond. You respond in rotating order. Here comes question number 1. How will you vote in November on the Massachusetts casino question? Would you support legislation putting the MGM Resorts International Casino back if voters reject casino gambling in November? And for the first answer, it's Ed Collins. Ed?
Yes, on the question in November, I'm going to vote against the referendum which would repeal the casino law. I support the casino. It's not my first choice of how you do economic development, but It's the choice that we have in front of us. It's whether to build a casino or not build a casino, not whether to build a casino or to open some other form of manufacturing business or so forth. On the second part of the question, I think that depends on what the voters say. I do believe in respecting the will of the voters, but if the state of Massachusetts were to repeal the law, but the voters of Springfield, and in particular the voters of the 9th Hampden District, were to vote for the casino, then I would file and support legislation to have a casino just in Springfield. We're tired of having the people in Boston tell us what's good for us. If they want it here, then I'd be for doing it.
Peter, your answer, please.
Well, just to answer the second part of the question first, Rich, I think that the will of the voters should take precedence here, and if the voters in Massachusetts decide that they don't want casino gambling in Massachusetts, we need to respect that, and we need to follow their lead on that. I also, like my opponents, do support casino gambling in Springfield. As Ed had mentioned, I don't think it's the best thing, but the days of American Bosch coming downtown and creating 5,000 manufacturing jobs are over. So, the casino could come in here, MGM could come in and invest $800 million to create 2,000 construction jobs and 3,000 to 5,000 permanent jobs, many of them very good jobs. So I think Springfield needs that. I'm downtown every day. My law office is downtown. And downtown is really struggling. We've seen a lot of businesses. The Fort, JT's Pub just went out of business. And before that, Lido's went out of business. Johnson's Bookstore has been out of business. I'm young enough to remember that. And I think that we really need to have something downtown, and casino looks like the best bet at this time.
Jose, your answer.
Well, I think we're all on the same page on this one. I also have every intention of voting no on the repeal. How can you turn down an $800 million investment and hundreds of good-paying jobs that we sorely need here in order to boost our economy in the city of Springfield and to put people back to work? Having said that, however, again, I will follow the will of the public. If the voters say that it's a done deal, that no pun intended, that it's not wanted, I think at some level you have to respect the will of the voters, and that's without follow. Again, I have every intention of voting no on the repeal. However, also having said that, I will also work very, very hard to make sure that the commitments that were put together by the casino companies in terms of jobs for Springfield residents, and working with our local venues, and working with vendors in our communities, and as well as they work to mitigate any social ills.
Okay, gentlemen, here comes the next question. 4 of the 5 Democrats running for the open state Senate seat in the district that includes Springfield support a repeal of the new law linking the gas tax to inflation. What is your position on question 1 on the November ballot that would repeal the 2013 law linking the gas tax to inflation? Peter Murphy?
Well, I don't think that we should link the gas tax to inflation. I think that generally speaking in Massachusetts, we are overtaxed. I mean, I run a small business, a small law firm. It's very difficult to meet payroll, pay workers' compensation taxes, pay unemployment taxes, pay personal property taxes, pay your property taxes in Springfield, pay both sides of the Social Security tax when you're self-employed. So, small businesses are struggling. Small businesses rely on capital and need to be able to grow. And when they are overtaxed, as I feel this initiative is, I don't think they have the ability to grow. So I am not for the continuing taxes on small business people and on consumers. I don't think it's a good idea, and that is my position on that issue.
Jose.
Well, from an ideological perspective, I understand the rationale behind it, basically targeting user taxes for folks. However, I would vote against it simply for the reason is, here in Western Massachusetts, we're suburban, we're rural, and it's going to cost us a lot more than it's going to cost folks in the eastern part of the state where they have a T. So I would vote against it, or I would vote to somehow amend the legislation to put Western Mass outside of the legislation.
Ed.
Yes, I'm opposed to the question. I would favor keeping the indexing on the gas tax. The gas tax, unlike a lot of other taxes, is a dedicated tax that goes to a dedicated revenue stream for highway maintenance and construction. And we know out here all too well in Western Massachusetts the way we have often been shortchanged. Look at the Route 57 extension. Look at what it's taken to finally get something moving on I-91 and the needed infrastructure repairs to I-91. The funds to do that come from the gas tax. And indexing it to inflation only makes sense, especially when you take into account the fact that because of improved fuel efficiency of vehicles, the amount of money that goes into that highway trust fund from the gas tax is going down all the time, not going up. So at least allowing that tax to keep up with inflation makes sense. Otherwise, the money's got to be found somewhere else in state funds to make up for it.
Candidates, here comes question number 3. More than 2,000 homeless families live in Massachusetts hotels and motels right now. And according to Chicopee Mayor Richard Koss, about 11% of those families live in 2 hotels and motels in Chicopee. Taxpayers have spent about $56 million on the program since 2009. What do you think needs to be done to drastically improve the state's homeless problem, and where does the money come from to pay for it? Jose?
Well, first of all, every governor in office for the past several years, and some current candidates for governor, have made commitments to eliminate homelessness. The issue's gotten worse. It hasn't gotten any better. And it's a very complicated issue, I understand that. But I think what you really have to do is address the root causes of homelessness, things like poverty, low educational attainment, and addictions. And you do that by increasing resources such as vocational job training for folks to get people to work to prevent homelessness. You do that by making early education accessible and a reality for all people in order to break that cycle. And you do that by providing programs like treatment in demand, as well as increasing mental health, funding for mental health services, and making sure that the federal government is working hand in hand with communities and local communities and the state in terms of providing services to the veterans population, which make up a lot of our people on the streets.
Ed Collins, your answer, please.
Yeah, I agree with almost everything that Jose said. It is fundamentally a problem of poverty and needs to be addressed. That's the long term. The shorter term answer, of course, is it doesn't make sense economically, nor does it make sense for the individual families involved to be housing people in hotel rooms. And when you look around in both of our cities, in Chicopee and in Springfield, there are plenty of abandoned, boarded up houses that we could be putting people back to work, rehabbing, and using as adequate residences for homeless families. It just makes sense. It takes leadership to put the pieces in place to make those things happen, but we need a better stock of affordable housing for families that are homeless, and we need to get them out of the hotel rooms. It doesn't make economic sense. It doesn't make sense from a human decency point of view.
Peter, your answer, please.
Thank you, Rich. Well, first of all, I used to work in a homeless shelter. I was a night manager at a homeless shelter, so I've seen firsthand the folks that are homeless, and most of them are children and families. So I think that it really is not good for Massachusetts to take these young people, children, and oftentimes their mother, and place them into hotels. And many of these folks are coming from the eastern part of the state. They're being moved out here to western Massachusetts, to an area that they're not familiar with. And it's not also good for the children who need to not go from one school to another. It's very transient. It's bad for them and their education. So I think in the short run, what we need to do is we need to establish a transitional phase where they are, for a short period of time in the hotels, they can then move to a transitional housing where they have a sort of a small apartment, and then they can get the training and the education and the type of services they need so they can live ultimately on their own. But getting them out of the hotels is a key.
All right, gentlemen, good job. We are going to take a short 2-minute break right now, and then more questions for the candidates running in the 9th Hampden District for the seat in the State House. You're watching 22 News. Welcome back to the debate between the candidates running for the 9th Hampden District seat in the State House. 3 Democrats are running in the primary from left to right: Edward Collins Jr., Peter Murphy, and Jose Tosado. I ask the questions, and they have 1 minute to come up with an answer. We're up to question number 4, candidates. And the state's welfare and transitional assistance programs have been criticized for not being properly managed and riddled with abuse and fraud. What specific changes would you support to ensure taxpayer dollars are being spent appropriately? Ed Collins, you have the first answer.
Well, thank you. It's a question that comes up every election year, every election cycle, and somebody once humorously remarked that there is not a line item in the state budget for waste, fraud, and abuse that we can cut. If there was, everybody would be for doing it. Finding places where there are inefficiencies and wasteful things being done on public assistance, I fully and completely support. There's been a lot of talk this year, for example, about whether or not there ought to be pictures on some of the cards that are used in place of cash grants for buying food and so on and so forth, to make sure that only the authorized person is using them. And for whatever reason, that didn't pass. But there could be good reasons why it was logistically not easy to do. But it makes common sense to me that sort of thing probably ought to be done. My personal view on fraud in public assistance is that the people who are committing it are robbing from other poor people. And I have no patience or tolerance for that whatsoever.
Peter Murphy, your answer, please.
Thanks very much. Well, I also agree that the cards should have photos on them. That way we can avoid fraud, or at least some fraud, people using cards that are not theirs. If there's photos on them, that can be checked by the store, and we can ensure that the right person is utilizing the card. I also think that we need to kind of increase the number of prosecutions. There are a number of poor people that are victimized where they essentially get cash or less cash than the food that they would buy from small vendors or store owners. And we need to really prosecute those store owners who are taking advantage of these folks. And also, I think that one of the best programs that there is out there so far as feeding people who need it is the WIC program. And in the WIC program, you get specific checks for specific food: milk, cereal, bread, etc. You know, people shouldn't be able to go out and buy cigarettes and buy lobster and buy food such as that with their cards. I think we need to really think about nutrition, and we need to focus on the prosecution of people who are taking advantage of our poor people.
Jose, your answer, please.
Well, often this is an issue of lax morals, and you really can't legislate morality, although I'm sure sometimes we wish we could. Frankly, while there's plenty of stories about this that get headlines, I don't think the issue is as large as it seems to be. There's certain people who are abusers, and we need to crack down on them. And yeah, having photo IDs does make sense in order to try and prevent some of that. But the biggest issue really for prevention is transparency and accountability, and holding state agencies accountable as well, because I don't believe that the oversight exists as strong as it should by state agencies to make sure how these cards are being utilized, who they're being utilized by. There needs to be some kind of oversight process that simply doesn't exist. So I think we need to have increased transparency, increased accountability, and it starts with state government as well.
Okay, gentlemen, next question. Jobs are ultimately created in the private sector. What should the state be doing to help create more jobs? Peter?
Well, we took a good step recently when there was an economic development bill passed by, in large part by Joe Wagner from Chicopee, and this created a number of opportunities for small business. First of all, after the stock market crash in 2009, access to capital became very difficult for small businesses, and this economic development bill does help create small business loans, loans that a traditional bank probably would not use or would not have as a product. And this, because small businesses need access to capital in order to grow. And since the crunch of 2009, it's been difficult for small businesses to get access to capital. I think the other thing, in addition to small business loans, is we need to continue to use brownfield development to clean up our properties, particularly in older communities like Springfield, Chicopee, and Holyoke, to make sure that those brownfields can be rehabilitated, and we can put businesses on there and create a tax base, and those businesses can grow. I think that continuing with the economic development bill would be very helpful for the 9th Hampden District.
Jose, your answer, please.
Yep. Well, I actually agree with Peter. I think the small business development is basically the backbone of America and of local economies. It's certainly true in Springfield and parts of Chicopee where you drive by storefronts, particularly in communities of color, and everyone is full. Unfortunately, what happens oftentimes is they don't have the access to capital to grow their business. As we talk about job growth, it's nice to bring in the big box companies when you can. That doesn't happen very often. I think we need to work with the businesses that we do have in the city of Springfield, provide technical assistance, grants for them, help them grow their own business. We can do that. We have the technology, we have the support. We need to make sure that the people in Boston, again, talking about trickling down economics, making sure that folks from Boston provide the monies for Western Massachusetts to help foster small business growth.
Ed Collins, your answer, please.
Yeah, I think as a state, I'm not so sure that we've always done a real good job of thinking critically about what type of businesses we're trying to attract to our area. What really made our economy hum in the 1950s, 60s, and at least for the first part of the 70s, were manufacturing jobs that were high value added work that was being carried out. And you know, manufacturing is pretty much gone from Western Massachusetts, although it's beginning to enjoy a little bit of a resurgence nationally. And I think we ought to be really keying on what things we need to be doing as a state to try to prepare a skilled workforce that meets the needs of potential manufacturers, and to use our capacity as a purchaser. The state is a large purchaser of services. This whole thing right now about the rail cars for the MBTA and perhaps for other mass transit organizations being manufactured in Springfield.
Okay. Hey, we do have time, though, for one more question. This time you have 30 seconds to respond. So each get one more question, 30 seconds to respond. The question is, what's the first piece of legislation you want to file or sponsor? Jose?
Well, one of the things I'd be interested in would be health care cost containment initiatives, legislation such as bulk buying of prescription medications in order to make prescriptions more affordable. I'd love to be engaged in that kind of strategy, to develop that kind of legislation in order to help out our citizens who are really having to travel to Canada in order to get their prescription medications.
Ed?
Probably to require the use of the smart gun trigger lock that Smith & Wesson developed on any gun that's sold in Massachusetts on a going forward basis, as well as a bill to go the second half of the distance on safe patient staffing for nurses in private hospitals. Whichever one hits the table first would be my first bill.
Peter?
Without a doubt, for me, it would be full-day preschool. I think that the key is to have full-day preschool, particularly for our urban kids. This is a data-driven issue. We know that when kids have full-day preschool from ages 3 to 5, they're more likely to graduate from high school, more likely to attend college, less likely to be on public assistance, less likely to commit crime. This is a key, particularly for our urban kids. We need to focus on full-day pre-K. It's a game changer for education.
Time now for closing statements. Each candidate has a minute to make a closing statement. Jose Tosado, you go first.
My family came here in 1955, one of the first Latino families to come to Springfield as migrant workers and decide to stay here. My dad sold food door to door, Latino food, saved enough money to buy his own restaurant. With that, he raised 9 children, my brothers and sisters. Never once deciding to go back to Puerto Rico. He saw something in Springfield. He believed in Springfield, and he saw it as a good place to raise a family. Even though he lost his life on January 11th, 1980, the first homicide of the city, where someone went to go rob him at his store, the first homicide of the 1980s, we never thought about leaving the city. We believe in Springfield. I've raised my family here, and like my father believed, I will continue to believe, and I ask you for your vote, and I ask you to believe in me on September 9th. Thank you very much.
Ed Collins, your closing statement, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you again to Channel 22. I've lived here my whole life also and have no intention of ever living anywhere else. I've spent almost my entire working life trying to make things better for the working families of this area, both as a working trade unionist and a trade union leader, legislatively, in community service, on United Way, on the Goodwill Industries, on Child and Family Services, as a trustee of the University of Massachusetts. What I've been about my whole life is trying to improve things for people in this area and for average working families. I think I can bring that experience to the legislature. I know how things work in our state legislature. I know how to get people's attention. I know how to build consensus. I know how to get people who don't always agree with me to see why it may be in their interest to do things that they otherwise might be inclined to do. And I think I can bring that experience for the benefit of the people in the 9th Hampden District of Boston.
Peter Murphy, your closing statement, please.
Thank you very much. Well, like my colleagues, you know, this has been a great campaign. It's been a positive campaign. I want to thank Channel 22 and Rich Teddemer, and thank you, the viewers, for watching this debate. We hope you learned a lot about the three candidates here and the differences that we have between us. You know, as I said, I'll fight tirelessly for the 9th Hampden District for Springfield and Chicopee. My mother was from Chicopee. My father grew up on Hungry Hill, and I attended the University of Massachusetts. I attended Western New England College School of Law, and I became a prosecutor under District Attorney William Bennett. I worked as a domestic violence prosecutor, as a sexual assault prosecutor. I fought for the rights of victims. And later on in life, I became a city solicitor, associate city solicitor, and I have a broad range of legal experience. And at the end of the day, that's what we do in Boston, is we legislate. We revise legislation and draft legislation. And the things that are important to me are public safety, the safety of our seniors, the safety of our neighborhoods, education, and economic development. And on September 9th, I ask humbly for your vote.
That concludes our look at the candidates running for the 9th Hampden District seat in the State House. Thanks to Edward Collins Jr., Peter Murphy, and Jose Tosado for participating today. Primary day, of course, is Tuesday, September 9th. If you missed any of today's debate, you can watch it again on wwlp.com. I'm Rich Teddemer. Have a good afternoon. See you.